She chose love over wealth, believing that happiness lay in the heart, not in gold. When she married a beggar, the world mocked her, calling it a foolish decision. But destiny had a plan greater than anyone could have imagined. How did fate turn her sacrifice into the greatest reward? The marketplace buzzed with life, voices blending in a symphony of trade and chatter. Merchants displayed their goods under colorful canopies, eager to attract buyers. In the midst of the crowd, a young woman named Zara walked with quiet determination. She was unlike the others who browsed the stalls, not because of her fine appearance, but because of the whispers that followed her wherever she went. People spoke of her choice in hushed tones, their judgment evident in every glance. She had rejected wealthy suitors, turned away powerful men who could have given her a life of ease. Instead, she had chosen a man with nothing, no land, no status, not even a home to call his own. The beggar she had married, a man named Jalil, was well known in the village. He sat by the grand gates each day, his worn-out robe and kind eyes familiar to all who passed. Some pitied him, others ignored him, and many saw him as nothing more than a shadow among the fortunate. But to Zara, he was more than what the world saw. She had watched him for months before she spoke to him for the first time. While others walked by without a second thought, she had noticed his humility. He never begged with desperation, never reached out greedily. If someone gave him a coin, he accepted it with quiet gratitude. If they passed him by, he simply lowered his gaze and remained patient. There was a dignity about him that no wealth could replace. One day, curiosity had driven her to approach him. "Why do you sit here every day?" she had asked. He had looked up at her, surprised that someone of her status would even acknowledge him. "Because this is where life has placed me," he had replied simply. His answer had stirred something deep within her. Over time, their conversations grew longer. She learned that Jalil was not always a beggar. He had once belonged to a family of merchants, but a cruel twist of fate had left him with nothing. Rather than resort to dishonesty or crime, he had chosen patience. As days turned to weeks, Zara found herself drawn to him. His wisdom, his strength in the face of hardship, his unwavering faith, these were qualities that no wealth could buy. When she declared her love for him, her family was outraged. "You will bring shame upon us," her father thundered. "You, a merchant's daughter, marrying a beggar?" Her mother pleaded with her. "Think of your future, Zara. You deserve a life of comfort, not a life of struggle." But Zara's heart was firm. "What is comfort if my soul is empty? What is wealth if I cannot love the man beside me?" Their disapproval did not shake her. Against all odds, she married Jalil in a quiet ceremony, witnessed only by a few who truly understood the depth of her decision. She walked away from the luxury of her family's home and stepped into a life of uncertainty, choosing love over riches. The villagers gossiped about her foolishness. "She threw away everything for a man who has nothing. She will regret this choice when hunger comes knocking." Yet, Zara paid no heed to their words. She knew that love was not measured in gold or possessions, but in the strength of two souls willing to face the world together. Jalil, though humbled by her sacrifice, vowed to care for her as best as he could. They lived in a small, broken-down hut at the edge of the village. Their meals were simple, often scarce, but they shared them with gratitude. When Jalil could not beg enough to buy food, Zara worked with her hands, sewing garments and selling them for a few coins. The life they led was not easy. The whispers continued, the stares never ceased, but Zara never wavered. She saw in Jalil what no one else could, a heart richer than any gold, a soul worth more than any fortune. One evening, as they sat outside their modest home, Jalil took her hands in his. "You have given up so much for me," he murmured. "I promise you, Zara, one day, I will give you the life you deserve." She smiled, squeezing his hands gently. "I already have it," she said. Little did they know, destiny was preparing something far greater than either of them had ever imagined. The choice Zara had made, the choice that had drawn ridicule and disbelief, would soon prove to be the greatest decision of her life. Fate was watching, and fate was about to change everything. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Zara and Jalil faced hardships unlike anything she had known before. The life she had chosen, one of simplicity and struggle, was far removed from the comfort she had once enjoyed in her father's home. Each morning, Jalil rose early, leaving their small dwelling to seek whatever work he could find. Some days, he carried sacks of grain for merchants. Other days, he cleaned stables or fetched water from the distant well. His hands, once accustomed to nothing but survival, grew rough with labor. But even in the face of endless toil, he never complained. Zara, too, worked tirelessly. She spent hours sewing garments for the village women, using the few materials she could afford. The coins she earned were few, but she cherished them. At night, she and Jalil sat together in the dim glow of a single candle, counting their meager earnings and planning how best to use them. Food was never guaranteed. Some days, they had only a handful of rice to share. Other times, Jalil returned home with nothing. But no matter how little they had, Zara always made sure to prepare a meal with love. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Jalil returned exhausted, his clothes covered in dust. He had spent hours digging trenches for a farmer who had paid him barely enough for a loaf of bread. He placed the hard-earned piece of bread on the table and sat down, sighing heavily. Zara tore the bread in half and handed him a piece, smiling. "It is enough," she said gently. Jalil shook his head, guilt clouding his eyes. "You deserve more than this, Zara. I promised to take care of you." She reached for his hand, her touch gentle yet firm. "You have given me more than riches ever could. We may have little, but we have each other." Her words comforted him, but he could not shake the feeling that she deserved a better life. The village, however, was less kind. Women whispered as Zara walked by, their judgment evident in their eyes. She was once the daughter of a wealthy merchant, and now look at her, they murmured. She should have married a man of status, another said. This is what happens when you choose love over sense. Zara heard every word, but she never let them wound her heart. She held her head high, knowing that her choice had been made out of love, not regret. But the struggles continued. One cold night, the roof of their small home began to leak. Rain poured in, drenching their only blanket. Zara curled up beside Jalil, shivering from the damp cold. As he held her close, shielding her from the chill, he whispered, "One day, I will build you a house so strong that no storm can touch you." Zara smiled against his chest. "As long as we are together, any home will do." Yet, even as she spoke those words, Jalil could see the exhaustion in her eyes. He could feel the weight of their struggles pressing against them. And in that moment, he made a silent promise, to change their fate, no matter what it took. One fateful afternoon, an opportunity arrived in the most unexpected way. Jalil had been walking through the village when he saw an elderly man struggling to pull his heavily loaded cart. The man's hands trembled with effort, his legs weak under the strain. Without hesitation, Jalil rushed forward, placing his hands on the cart and pushing with all his strength. The old man looked at him with gratitude. "Thank you, my son. May Allah bless you for your kindness." Jalil simply smiled. "It was nothing, sir. May you reach your home safely." The man studied him for a long moment. "What is your name?" "Jalil," he replied humbly. The old man nodded. "I have been searching for a man like you. A man with a strong back and an honest heart. Would you come work for me?" Jalil hesitated. "I am only a beggar, sir. I do not have skills worthy of employment." The man chuckled. "And yet, you were the only one who stopped to help me. That is a skill more valuable than gold. Meet me tomorrow at my estate, and we shall see what you can do." That night, Jalil told Zara about the encounter, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time in months. "Perhaps this is the beginning of something new," he said, holding her hands tightly. Zara smiled, though she dared not hope too much. "Whatever comes, we will face it together." Little did they know, this simple act of kindness was about to change their lives forever. Fate had been watching, and destiny was ready to reward them in a way they could never have imagined. The next morning, Jalil arrived at the old man's estate just as the sun cast its golden glow across the land. Unlike the modest village homes he was accustomed to, this estate stood grand and dignified, its wide courtyard bustling with workers. He hesitated at the entrance, unsure if he truly belonged in a place like this. But he had given his word, and a man's word was his honor. Gathering his courage, he stepped forward. The old man, who introduced himself as Malik, greeted him warmly. "I see you are punctual," he observed with approval. a good quality in a man. Jalil bowed his head respectfully. I am ready to work, sir. Just tell me what you need. For the rest of the day, Jalil labored harder than he ever had before. He carried heavy sacks, repaired broken fences, and assisted in tasks he had never done before. Every time he struggled, Malik simply nodded, as if testing his endurance. But Jalil did not falter. His mind was not on the pain in his muscles but on Zara, the woman who had given up everything for him. By sundown, Malik called him over. You worked well today, he said. Most men would have complained by now, but you never did. Jalil wiped sweat from his brow. Complaints do not feed a man's family. Malik chuckled. Indeed, they do not. He studied Jalil thoughtfully before speaking again. I have no sons of my own, and I need someone I can trust. Would you be willing to work for me permanently? Jalil blinked in surprise. You mean, as a servant? Malik shook his head. No. As my apprentice. I need someone to manage my affairs, and I see potential in you. Jalil's heart pounded. He had never been offered such an opportunity before. But he hesitated. Sir, I am just a beggar. I have no education, no background. Why would you choose me? The old man smiled. Because wealth means nothing if the man holding it has no integrity. You have strength, honesty, and patience, qualities that cannot be bought. That night, Jalil returned home with a new sense of purpose. Zara listened carefully as he told her everything, her eyes shining with pride. This is a blessing, Jalil, she whispered. Allah has opened a door for us. He held her hands, determination filling his chest. Then I will walk through it. Days turned to weeks, and Jalil proved himself worthy of Malik's trust. He learned how to manage trade, oversee workers, and handle business negotiations. The skills came naturally to him, and Malik treated him as a son, guiding him with wisdom. For the first time in his life, Jalil was not just surviving, he was building something greater. One evening, after a long day of work, Malik summoned Jalil to his chamber. The air was thick with something unspoken, and Jalil sensed this was no ordinary conversation. The old man poured himself a cup of tea and gestured for Jalil to sit. After a moment of silence, he spoke. I have watched you closely, Jalil. You remind me of myself when I was young, driven, determined, but with no one to give you a chance. He set his cup down. That is why I have made a decision. Jalil listened intently. I am old, Malik continued. My days are numbered, and I have no heirs. I need someone to inherit what I have built. His eyes met Jalil's. I want that person to be you. Jalil's breath caught. Sir, I do not understand. Malik smiled. You will. From this day forward, I will not just be your master. I will be your father. I wish to adopt you, to make you my son in name and deed. The words struck Jalil like lightning. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined such a fate. The beggar who once sat by the village gates was now being offered a legacy greater than gold. Tears welled in his eyes as he knelt before Malik. I am not worthy of such an honor. Malik placed a hand on his shoulder. Worth is not measured by birth, but by the heart. And your heart is strong, my son. That night, Jalil returned home, barely able to contain the news. When he told Zara, she gasped, covering her mouth in shock. Jalil, this is beyond what we ever imagined. He took her hands in his. I told you I would build you a house no storm could touch. Now, I can finally give you the life you deserve. Tears fell from Zara's eyes, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. She had married a beggar, believing love was enough. Now, love had rewarded her in a way neither of them had foreseen. Fate had not abandoned them. Destiny had simply been waiting for the right moment to reveal its plan. And the best was yet to come. The news of Jalil's adoption spread quickly, reaching every corner of the village. The same people who once mocked him as a beggar now whispered in awe. Some could not believe it. How could a man who once sat by the gates with nothing now stand as the heir to a powerful estate? Zara watched the change unfold with quiet pride. She had always seen Jalil's worth, even when the world did not. Now, that worth was undeniable. Under Malik's guidance, Jalil transformed. He no longer wore the tattered robes of his past. He walked with confidence, speaking with the wisdom of a man who had learned from struggle. He oversaw Malik's lands, conducted trade with merchants, and made decisions that affected hundreds of workers. Every challenge he faced, he met with patience. But while some celebrated his rise, others did not forget his past. One afternoon, as Zara walked through the marketplace, she overheard a group of women whispering, "She married a beggar, and now look where she stands." Another scoffed, "She got lucky. No one could have predicted this." Zara turned to them, her voice calm yet firm. "Luck had nothing to do with it. Jalil was always worthy. It just took time for the world to see it." The women fell silent, their expressions uneasy. They had spent years looking down on her, but now they had nothing to say. At home, Jalil sat with Malik, discussing the future. The old man, though wise, had grown weaker. His once steady hands trembled as he lifted his cup of tea. "My son," he said one evening, his voice softer than usual, "the time has come for you to take full responsibility." Jalil's brows furrowed. "Father, you are still strong. There is no need to rush." Malik smiled. "Strength is not only of the body, but of the mind. And my mind tells me that I have done my part. Now, it is your turn." Jalil understood. He did not argue. When Malik passed away weeks later, the village mourned the loss of a great man. But in his place stood another, a man who had risen from the dust, a man who carried not just wealth, but integrity. Jalil honored Malik's legacy by expanding the estate, treating workers with kindness, and ensuring fairness in trade. His name became known beyond the village, reaching the ears of nobles and rulers. Merchants sought alliances with him, and travelers spoke of the man who had once been a beggar but now held the power of a king. But despite all the wealth and status, Jalil never forgot where he came from. He still walked the streets without guards, still greeted the poor with kindness, still knelt in prayer beside those who had nothing. One day, an old man approached him at the village gates. His clothes were torn, his hands shaking with age. "Sir," the man said hesitantly, "I once passed you when you were sitting right here, begging for food. I never gave you anything. And yet, now you are the one who could help me." Jalil looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. A man's worth is not measured by what he has, but by what he does with it. He handed the old man a pouch of gold. "Use this wisely, and never look down on those who have nothing, for tomorrow they may have everything." That night, as Jalil sat with Zara under the stars, he turned to her and whispered, "Would you have ever imagined this life?" She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "I did not marry a beggar, Jalil. I married a man with a heart of gold. And I knew, one day, that gold would shine." Jalil kissed her forehead. "Whatever comes next, I promise you this, we will always remain as we were, two souls who chose love over the world's expectations." And so, the beggar who had nothing became a man of great wealth, not just in gold, but in wisdom and love. And the woman who had married him out of faith became the queen of a story no one had ever expected. Destiny had not only rewarded them, it had proven that true riches were found in the heart.